So guys, today we're gonna be going over the study that AccountTECH did about the impact that all of us might be running into from changes in the NAR settlement. And particularly what we're looking at is if the NAR settlement and buyer agency, if it impacts the buyer side profit margins. When I say profit margins, I mean like commissions that real estate agents can charge to buyers and sellers, or if, as some people and a lot of people think, the profit, I mean the commission margin that you can charge to buyers and sellers, if that softens because of this settlement, we want to start being prepared for what that's going to do to our profit and loss statements. And this is the third time that we've been doing this webinar because it keeps getting oversubscribed. Just this morning, though, guys, we got a message from Dean at T360, who's co-hosting it with me. And after we look over the numbers, what Dean has been doing is talking a little bit about strategy for how you can prepare your company and your financials and your expenses to meet the profitability challenges of this moment. Dean had like an emergency come up at home, and he's not able to join us to talk about what you can do about these numbers. So I'm wondering, Mr. Fight, when I finish showing the numbers, would you mind sharing some ideas about how people can either make themselves profitable by buying your book and reading it, or just what in general they should be doing? Would you be okay about talking with that for a minute?
I would be happy to help any way I can.
Great. I appreciate it, sir. Since we're going to have a little bit of extra time because of Dean not being available today, AccountTECH has just finished one of the most interesting studies we've ever done, and it's about the labor cost relationship to profitability and how we can use labor cost to predict profitability. It's a very interesting study. It's going to be actually our next study that we release to the public. It just got finished over the weekend, and since we have a little bit of time today, after Mr. Fight gives us some ideas about what to do to manage profitability, I'll give you all a sneak peek on the labor cost profitability forecasting that we've been able to, the formulas we've been able to come up with. It's some real interesting stuff. But that's how we'll wrap up. Let's get started. But Deanne, you're going to take over fielding people's question in the chat. You want to talk about that for a quick second, how they do it?
Oh, hi, my name is Deanne. If you guys have any questions during this webinar, please put your questions in the chat. Just make sure it's to meeting group chat. And during the Q&A session, we'll be reading off your questions, so Mark or any of the other participants can answer.
All right, well, let's dig right in then. So for this study that we were trying to do, we're trying to get at what is some of the impacts that we could be experiencing after the NAR settlement goes into effect. And so the purpose of this study, we're trying to look at profitability, but when you're trying to do a profitability forecast, one of the things you got to be careful about is to have static parameters. Like you can't have, because there's so many things that could change. Volume could change, agent counts could change, the split between you and your agents is changing. And if everything's changing, how do you know what the impact is of any one variable? So for the purposes of this study, we made the following assumptions. We said, for this study, let's assume that after NAR, let's assume that the sales volume that your real estate company does stays the same. And the split in general between you and your agents, that stays the same. And let's assume your net profit in the past, let's say last year or last 6 months or whatever, it's whatever it was. So if these things, if we assume net profit and sales volume and the split between you and agents, primarily the volume and the split between you and their agents, if that stays the same, what's going to happen to net profit if the margin that agents can charge sellers, what's going to happen if that changes? So if you're an AccountTECH customer, the numbers that you need, and if you're not an AccountTECH customer, it doesn't matter because we're going to show you tools for non-AccountTECH customers. The numbers that you're going to need, and pick any date range, you could pick last year, you could pick the first 6 months of this year, but what you need is you need to get the total volume. You need the total volume that you closed in whatever date range you're talking about. You can get that from a Spotlight. And what is the split on average that you charge between you and your agents? Of course, you've got some agents on 50-50, some agents on 90-10, you've got people on caps, you have people on all different splits. But when you average it all out, overall as a company, what's the split that we're making on the commissions? Now, if you have those numbers and your net commission or your net profit during whatever date range we're looking at, then you're ready to do this study. So let me explain how it works. I'm going to just jump ahead here. So if we start with these numbers, sales volume, let's say you take last year's sales volume, last year's split between you and your agents, and last year's operating profit. Then we're ready to do our analysis. And for those of you that don't use AccountTECH, we actually even made a tool, assuming all those things are static, we made a tool to help us figure out if agents, instead of charging 3%, can only charge 2.75%, or if agents are charging 3%, but now in the future they only can charge 2.5 or 2.25, what is going to happen to net profit if how much the agents can charge the sellers and buyers? If that changes, what is it going to happen to our net profit? Now, for those of you that don't use AccountTECH, or even AccountTECH users that want to do a little experimenting, you can go to this website, AccountTECH.com, and put in /NAR calculator, or you could take a picture of this little image here to go to that website. And it's a tool that we spun up for anybody that comes to this webinar, so you can have this calculator to calculate what your possible future profit's going to be. Let me stop sharing. I'm going to go to that page and I'm going to show it to you. So if I go over to that page, I got it up right here. Let me share my screen again. So in this example, and this is from a real AccountTECH customer's real 2025 numbers. So if you go to this website and you put in your volume, let's say from last year, this is what I did for one of our customers. You put in their gross, so they did 352 million in volume. They had 11.5 million in gross commission. Overall, they charged 19% company dollar. So they retained 19% of the gross commission. And this company at the end of the year had $44,600 of profit. So put in your numbers on this little calculator tool and hit this calculate net profit. Now, when we did that for this company, we saw with them keeping 19% of 11.5 million of gross commission, they were keeping their agents were charging 3.26% commission. That's what they were charging in their market. And with their agents charging 3.26, they were netting 44.6. And this is how you use the calculator to get at these numbers. If, for instance, in their market, if the agents charged well, there's 375, if the agents charged 3.25%, just 1/100th of a percent less, then instead of 44.6, last year they would have made 38.7. And if the commission that the buyers and sellers that they could charge, instead of charging 3.26, if they only charged 3%, everything else being the same, overhead, expenses, and whatever, that same company on $352 million of volume would have lost $128,000. $128,000 lost for just a 26.26 change in the commission rate that gets charged. And as you use this tool, you can see if volume and your split between you and your agents stays the same, with the overhead that you have at 2.75%, they would have lost almost $300,000. And if margins on that same company, if margins go down to 2%, they would have lost almost $800,000 in 2023. So these impacts, the potential impact of the commission rates that we can charge sellers has a big potential impact on the net profit that we're going to retain. And that's what this tool is for. If you want to use this tool, especially if you're not an AccountTECH customer, you can just start over and clear these numbers and put in your own numbers, calculate them, print the numbers, export it to Excel, just so you can do a little forecasting and research. Now, let me go back to my little PowerPoint, and I can show you, if you're an AccountTECH customer already, you can use this tool, but you don't have to, because in your Darwin, these numbers are auto-calculated for you. Let me show you. Let me just show my screen again. Can you guys see that okay? So if you're an AccountTECH, can you guys see okay? All right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're an AccountTECH user, just go to your spotlights and bring up the NAR forecasting tool. And it knows your P&L, it knows your volume, it knows your profitability. So it'll calculate all these numbers for you. It'll calculate them for you automatically right in your spotlight. So you don't have to use that tool, and you can switch between any of your companies and see what these numbers look like. Again, this is what, based on your real numbers, this is what your profit was, and this is what your profit would be at 3% or 2.75%. And the point of this is to try to see if margins, in fact, if margins that we can charge sellers does change, how much do we need to adjust? And so we did this on 100 companies 100 different companies that use AccountTECH of all different sizes that we know keep good accounting and good financial records. And based on that, I've got some raw data to share with you guys so you can see a little bit like what we were seeing. So we took the results of all these, like 100 different companies, and we started with small companies with low agent counts. Some of them had, like you can see here, 1 office or 2 offices. And you can see here at 3% what these companies' profit would be if it goes down to 2.75, 2.5, 2.252%. You can see a number of these companies, even if the margins that we can charge to sellers and buyers goes down, they're still going to be profitable. Not as profitable, but they're at least not going to go net negative. But we did find that most companies, of smaller companies like this, if they, once you get the commission rates down to 2.5 or 2 and 2.25, if the sales commissions goes down that low, these companies are going to be very challenged to have any net profitability unless they do something pretty dramatic with their expenses and their overhead. I'll show you how it gets a little more interesting. One of the things that we found is the number of offices that you have is a real big impact on your net profitability. We found in 2023, companies that have a relatively small agent count, but more than one office, they were already struggling with profitability even before the NAR settlement comes into place. But they're not the only ones. I mean, there are small companies, like I said, when I say small, like under 50 agents, that are profitable at 3%, and they'll be profitable at 2%. They're profitable at 3%, they'll be profitable in 2.5%. But a lot of companies that are profitable at 3% commission rate or 2.75 commission rate, once we get into 2.5 or 2.25, they're going to struggle to be profitable unless they do something with their overhead. Now, as we start moving into slightly bigger companies, let's say like 30 to 35 to 60 agents or so, you can see there's lots of companies that are successful where they're making money at 3% and they're still going to be making money at 2%. But there's quite a number of companies, and again, they seem to be companies for the most part that have multiple offices. So less than 50, less than 60 agents with more than one office, they're struggling to be profitable. And if the commission rates go down, it's going to be harder. But even the ones that are profitable at 3%, if we go down to 2.5%, the rates, it gets harder and harder for these companies to maintain any net profitability. Now, I don't know why this is, but there's something about offices between 60 and 90 agents. I mean, companies between 60 and 90 agents. It seems to be a sweet spot for some reason, because in all the companies that we evaluated, companies between 60 and 90 agents had the most profitability in 2023, and they maintained their profitability forecasts for longer than other companies with different agent counts. I don't know why that is, but there's something in the overhead structure of companies between 60 and 90 agents. And a good portion of them didn't forecast to become negative until like 2.25 or 2%. But once you go over 100 agents, no, and now obviously if you have over 100 agents, most of the time you have more than one offices. Certainly offices, I mean, companies with large agent counts and a single office are the ones that have the easiest road to maintaining profitability. Also, if you have a business model that's based on desk fees and not agent split, well, then it doesn't matter what the commission splits are, and because your agents are renting offices, so your profit stays the same no matter what. But the larger agent count companies had the hardest challenges with profitability. But it's interesting, it's not universal. Like, there are large companies with large numbers of agents, large number of offices that are seriously profitable at 3%, and they're going to stay profitable all the way down to 2%. So in terms of measuring how the impact of lowered commission fees to sellers is going to affect us, it's not universally true that if you're over 100 agents, you can't be profitable. It's not universally true if you have lots of offices, you can't be profitable. It's just how people choose to run their companies vis-a-vis overhead. So here's some just kind of summary ratios for companies that have under 30 agents. we found that in 2023, 65% of them were profitable. If for companies under 30 agents, if commission rates generally go to 2.5%, on the companies in our study, only 60% of them would still be profitable at a 2.5% charge to sellers. And if it goes down to 2, then it flips upside down. And the companies in our study, if commission rates go down to 2%, then 65% of the companies in our study are going to be unprofitable. Again, unless they do something dramatic to cut overhead. Now, with companies that have 30 to 50 agents, they had the hardest time of it in 2023. Even at 3% of the, 3%, at 3%, 71% of them were profitable, but you can see that profitability gets really challenged, so that at 2.5%, companies with 30 to 50 agents at a 2.5% margin, there's a 57% likelihood that those companies will be unprofitable. And for companies with 50 to 75%, we found in our study with companies between 50 and 75 agents, more than 50% of them were unprofitable in 2023. And you can see if rates go all the way down to 2%, with current overhead levels, a very large percentage of those companies, if they don't change their overhead structure, 82% of them are forecasted to be unprofitable. The hardest part seems to be with companies between 100 and 200 agents, where when you have big companies with hundreds of agents, usually they have a lot of offices, and those seem to be the ones that are going to be most challenged to remain profitable if margins do go all the way down to 2.25%. So one last thing I want to share with you guys before we ask some questions, and then maybe get some good ideas from Mr. Fike maybe about what we can do to get our expenses under control. Because for those of you who don't know, Mr. Fike has a very successful company and even wrote the book about how to make your brokerage profitable through recessions. So we'll let him talk about that. But we tried to figure out for different size companies, under 20 agents, under 75 agents, what does it look like you need to do? What does it look like you need to do on a per agent basis to get to break even if you're losing money? And so, for instance, for small offices like under 20 agents, we found that if seller commissions go down to 2.5%, some way or somehow you're going to need to figure out how to collect an extra $7,800 a year from every agent. Likewise, if you've got an office of 100 to 200 agents, and commission percentages go down to 2.5%, you somehow or other need to figure out to get to break even, not to be profitable, just to break even. You've got to figure out some way to increase revenue per agent by 3,300. Now, obviously, if you lower expenses, you don't have to increase revenue per agent. You could get profitable by lower expenses. But if you're keeping expenses the same, you have to gather about $3,300 per agent more to get to break even. So, Mr. Fite, could you guys run a really tight, profitable ship, and you've got your expenses really under control. Could I ask you to maybe share some ideas with people about what you think they could do to try to keep their company profitable regardless of the environment?
Just so everybody knows, I did not prepare for this.
Oh, no.
So this is called winging it, but
Yeah,
I'm sometimes pretty good at winging it, so I'll do my best. I shared a presentation that I've done. Hopefully everybody can see that. A presentation that I've done really for the last year and a half or so after writing this book, Success Through a Recession. So I'll start out, Mark, by telling a story. It was 1981, July. Interest rates were 17%. We had a company, a small company, and we were broke. We had no money left. It was July, and I told our leadership team at the time, there were 6 of us, that if we didn't pull this out by January, we're going to have to close our doors. And my sister and I were partners. She slammed her hand down on her dining room table. That's where we used to have our leadership meeting. And I would slam it down now, but I'd make too much noise. And she said, I will not be a part of a negative goal. We will have $10,000 in the bank and all bills paid by January 1st, 1982. And that was a awakening moment of a negative goal compared to a positive goal. And I will tell you, by January of 1982, we had $10,000 in the bank and all bills paid. That 6-month period was not fun. Just like when your commission rates go from 3% to 2%, they're not fun. So for those of you that don't know me, I know a lot of people on the call. We've been in business 87 years. My sister and I bought our company 47 years ago from our parents. We had 1 office and 8 people. So we've been small. We've been medium-sized company, Mark, like you had up there on the screen. And we're a large company now. And if you saw the company with 1,149 agents, it showed our profitability. And by the way, we were profitable based on your study when it went from 3 to 2% collection. So hopefully your projection will be correct and will be profitable in 2024 and 2025. I would highly recommend, of course, by the way, I do not make a living out of this book. All the proceeds go to our charitable foundation, just for your information. And I wrote this book for the benefit of my fellow brokers and owners and entrepreneurs out there in the world. But enough on the book. You can find it out on Amazon, Success Through a Recession. Look up my name, it'll be out there. Okay. With that in mind, I'm going to skip through some slides very quickly and just show you some things. And I said very quickly, there we go. How can you tell a market is changing? Interest rates, NAR settlement, etc. So I'm going to stop here. This was actually in 2006, April 2006, when I had gone to a brainstorming meeting, and brokers in Florida and Detroit were telling us that their market had dropped like a rock. I came back to our leadership team and I made 3 flip charts, and we spent a full day looking at what we could cut immediately. We had become fat, dumb, and happy. By the way, 2006 was the best year in real estate. They thought I was out of my mind. We made a second chart, cut if you see the market starting to turn. October of 2006, we started to turn, so we looked at chart number 2. Chart number 3 cut deeper. And when I say we made these charts, let me be clear. We looked at every check, every bill, every vendor, every lease. It was And we did the same thing in 1981. We did it again in 2006 before the Great Recession happened. We got a 6-month jump on the Great Recession. I'll skip over a lot of this stuff. I do for those of you in Century 21, Coldwell Banker, the Anywhere brands, I do this presentation every year for the Ascend group. So that's what you're seeing here. But here's the one I wanted to show you. By 2009, we flashed to chart number 7. Chart number 7. Okay. Let me see. Again, caught me off guard. Okay, here's a quote from my father. Make it do, wear it out, or do without. In other words, you look at every income line, every expense line, every check written, categorized, must have, can do without, excuse me, or do not need. And Mark, you can tell me to be quiet anytime here.
No,
I
I'm
could go
loving
on
it.
for an hour, and I know you don't have time.
No, keep
Excuse
going.
me?
I'm loving this. Please keep going.
Okay. Here's a couple of things. Don't let them see you sweat. That would be your agents and your staff. Communicate with your leadership team. Don't know how large your companies are. They need to know what's going on, and they need to have confidentiality agreements signed by you and them so that they are not going out there saying, oh gosh, we're in trouble here. You analyze your expenses, your cost versus ROI. What are you spending money on, or are you getting a return on investment? Advertising, print, internet, janitorial, lawn service, FedEx, anything, everything, copy machines. Discontinue what you don't need. Cut the items that can't be seen by your agents and staff. Very important right there. Cut things immediately that are not seen by your agents and staff. Terminate contracts if you can. Do not renew contracts. And from this day forward, any contract you sign, never, ever, never sign a contract with an automatic renewal. Never. Suck it up. Go to your creditor's landlord in person or by Zoom. Do not hide. Hide your pride. Just put it on the shelf. You don't have any more pride. Have them sign a confidentiality agreement. Be honest and upfront. Show your numbers in the good times and show them in the bad times, tough times. Leaseholders. Be specific of what you want. That would be your equipment leases and or your property leases. I negotiated with every single property lease we had. I got all kinds of buyouts. I was able to close. I'm sorry, we don't close offices, we merge offices. We were able to merge offices. I bought out leases. I renegotiated leases. I remember one in particular, they negotiated my base rent down, but I had a single payment that I had to do, I think 10 years down the road. I had a long-term lease, but I was able to negotiate that out. If we had leases, equipment leases expire, we bought them out, paid for the service only. If you are paying a minimum service on a copy machine, never do it again. One thing I learned through this experience, you pay for one click, you pay for the click. If you don't click, you don't pay. They make money on your minimum number of copies per month. You lose money, they make money. All right, be specific what you want for your landlords. Close, we never close offices. We merge or combine offices. Buy out your leases. I've talked through all that. I'm getting through this real quick. Leases expire, move offices, downsize. If you have leases expire, that's when you can downsize and move. Remove your pride. We had offices in office buildings where our managers and top producers had reserved parking places. We were paying $50 a month for them. We gave them all back to the landlord. For the future, no more personal liability. I don't have personal liability on anything except maybe my franchise agreement, and I don't even think I have that anymore. But anyway, that's another story. Suck it up. No more manager credit cards. We found after our audit, we had a manager that bought, I'm not proud of this, season tickets to the Mavericks. He told us he was recruiting people and taking them to the Mavericks game after we caught him buying season tickets. He never recruited one person from those season tickets at the Mavericks. I mean, that was just a waste of money. Janitorial services, 2 to 3 times a week, went to once a week, and we're still doing once a week now. Branch managers became regional sales managers overseeing 1 to 3 offices. We now use virtual assistants in the Philippines. We don't make that public. I hope you're not going to call our people and tell them that, but we do virtual assistants. We went on a spending freeze. We had a salary freeze. We had no 401k match in the rough times. No profits, no profit sharing. We reduced K1 distributions. We have a whole, in the book, this all goes into a lot of detail about how you build your cash reserves so you can make it through the tough times. Personal property taxes. That was a big one. We had no idea how they really worked. I learned how they worked, and we started fighting our personal property taxes and saved thousands of dollars a year. Again, we're a large company with a lot of offices and a lot of assets. We started reducing and enforcing the agent receivables. We've got that down to a manageable expense now. And we implemented credit card payments from agents. And of course, AccountTECH allows us to do that with our accounting system. Mileage was reduced. We pay mileage for our employees, but we reduced it to 33 cents a mile. We got rid of all of our postage machines. Never put those back in an office again. During the really rough times in Texas, it's really hot in the summer, we discontinued bottled water. That was probably the biggest thing that agents saw. No more snacks. Instead of flowers on people going in the hospital or deaths, we have a large company that happens pretty much every week in our company. We deliver teddy bears to the hospitals, and we make a $25 donation to charities. These are little bitty things, but give you an idea, our chart 1 was I was buying lunch anytime I'd go out with people in the company, managers, staff, or whoever. I told them right up I was not going to buy their lunch anymore. We were going to go Dutch. That saved over $12,000 a year just by me not buying their lunches. COVID. We did Zoom meetings for 3 years before COVID. We did, before that, WebEx, GoToMeeting, Adobe Connect, and of course, we've been using Zoom ever since. So when we went into COVID, we didn't miss a beat. We moved home. We found out during COVID, now this was what, 2.5, 3 years ago, 4 years ago actually, when it hit, that our people could work from home. And so our top leadership, we have 9 people on our principals group, they all work from home. I work from home. Accounting works from home now. Marketing works from home. IT, relocation. Our title we have a title company, they work from home. Judge-Fied Insurance works from home. There are 3 of them that work in a shared workspace. But we saved $282,556 in the last 2 years by moving people home, just in lease expense alone. So, know your numbers. Hopefully you know your numbers. If you don't, read the book Traction. I will skip over all this. I've rarely been sorry for over communicating. I've almost always been sorry for under communicating. All right, here are the numbers. These are real numbers in our company. 2006, our gross commissions were $36 million. Our company dollar was $10 million. Our profit was $353,000. You can see we went in the red. By 2021, we had dropped, 2011, we had dropped to $17 million from $36 million in gross. Our company dollar had dropped to $6 million, and yet our profit was higher than it was in 2026, or 26. You can see we carry on through today in 2023. We did $54 million in gross commissions. Our company dollar was $17 million, and our net profit was $4.5 million. So there are our numbers right there. It's all from that book. We went down 50, you can see all our numbers here. We went up $844,000 last year in profit, yet our gross commission went down by managing money, managing expense. This is our cash on hand. I believe at this date, we had right at 10.5 months of cash available. We always keep 9 months, minimum is 6 months, but we're always looking to get 12 months. We hit 12 months back here. We actually purchased some stock back from one of our stockholders, and we've built that back up. Here's an interesting thing. During the recession, we asked our leadership team to take a reduction in salary. That was one of our charts. The first person that took a reduction in salary or people were myself and my sister. We calculated that we could take no income out of our company for 1 year. We ended up not taking a dime out of our company for 5 years. 12/31 of 2011, January 1st, 2012, we paid every single manager back every dime that they had sacrificed during that period of time. We didn't lose one manager through that whole process. Very proud of that. Months of cash reserves, you can see we got up to 11.3 months. We're now, at the end of this year, at 9.2 months. By the way, we did 3 acquisitions the last quarter of last year, so that took our cash down. So Mark, one thing, an opportunity that's in front of us based on your chart that I am definitely into right now is mergers and acquisitions. This is opportunity time coming up in the next year for us to really grow our companies, those that have cash in the bank, those that can know how to buy companies. It's a real opportunity coming our way based on your chart. So thanks for that's the way I'll look at that chart, is I see this as opportunity for us.
That's
okay. I'm probably gonna.
No, I just I know I just surprised you with asking you to talk a little bit, but this is fantastically valuable information. I can't even tell you how appreciative I am. I will tell everybody else a little piece of gossip with you guys. One of our salespeople a few months ago was trying to do a software sales presentation, doing a software sales presentation to somebody down south. And he said something really interesting. He goes, if I buy your software, will you guys help us organize our financials and organize our profit and loss statement so it'll look really good to the judge fight and they'll buy us? So there's There's actually people out there right now, and it makes sense if you think your company is going to go on the market. I imagine, Mr. Fight, that when you're looking at mergers and acquisitions, when you're deciding how much to offer for the company, in part, it has to be related to how good and how clean their financials, how good they have their expenses under control, stuff like that.
Absolutely. That's a whole nother seminar for another day, Mark, but we have bought over 70 companies. We bought one in September, one in October, one in November, one in January, and one last month. We bought 5 companies in the last 10 months.
There it is. And this, I agree with you entirely. From looking at so many companies' financials, there's a lot of opportunity out there right now for companies where that other people can't run profitable, that if you run your business like a tight ship, like Mr. Fight does, they couldn't make their companies profitable, but you could make them profitable. So there's some great acquisition opportunities. But before we go to questions and answers, I promised you guys I'd give you a preview of our upcoming labor cost study, and I found it interesting. And then we're going to go to questions. But then for the next study we did, we're trying to get at, is there labor cost benchmarks that anybody could use to help them figure out how much money they should be spending on labor? And I'm talking about office staff when I said that, how much should they spend on labor? So we looked at the labor cost in successful companies and successful offices. We looked at labor costs in unprofitable companies, and we did the same thing. We got 100 companies of all different sizes, from 10 agents to companies of 1,000 agents and so forth. And we tried to come up with some benchmarks to see if we could find something that's predictive. And we just finished this study last week. So what we found for the first 6 months of 2024 is, across all companies of all different sizes, per closed transaction, okay, per closed transaction, you take the labor cost divided by closed transaction. On average, companies are spending $919 on labor for every side that they close. Now, if you look at labor cost per agent, we looked at it that way too, trying to find something that was predictive. And we found that if you look at your labor cost per month and divide it by your agent count, the average that brokerages are spending across the country is $460 per month on labor, on staff labor, for every agent that they have that works for them. Now, those numbers seemed really high to me, so we tried to see if these are good metrics to use in terms of understanding labor cost. So we separated profitable companies in the first half of 2024 from unprofitable companies. And profitable companies are spending $839 per side on average, and unprofitable companies are spending $1,000 on labor per side in the first 6 months. But on a per agent basis, there wasn't that big of a spread. So we're trying to get at a usable metric for understanding, like, how do you forecast your profitability? So what we did is we took the numbers and we put them on a chart, and it was pretty darn frustrating, because here, if we look at monthly labor cost per agent, so here's a company, for instance, a company that has 174 agents, another one that has 181 agents, and the amount they're spending per agent per month, 248 agents in 2 different companies, the amount of money that they're spending per month per agent varies like crazy, from like $400 a month per agent up over to like $800 a month per agent. So it just didn't look like labor cost per agent is predictive. So we said, let's look at it per side. But when we looked at it per side, it was even less predictive. So here we've got a bunch of companies that did, in the first 6 months, between 126 and 127 sides, but their labor cost per side varied from a few $100s up to over $2,000. Same thing with some companies that did more sides, from 209 to 230 sides. Their labor cost per side was all over the place. So then we said, all right, well, let's see if we can figure out if labor cost per side is correlated highly to net profitability. So what we did was we overlaid net profitability, and I shouldn't say net profitability, operating profits. So what you would think of as EBITDA. We overlaid EBITDA on top of this chart, and it just became inconsistent. There are companies that are unprofitable. This is the zero line, unprofitable with a low labor cost per side, and companies that are profitable with a higher labor cost per side. I've got an example of it here. So if you look here, here's a company that did 160 sides over 6 months, over the first 6 months of 2024. One of our customers in our study, they lost $7,600. They spent $395 per side. Another company they did 168 sides. They spend $750 per side on labor, and they made $350,000 in the first 6 months. So trying to figure out labor and using a labor cost metric that's based on the number of sides that you do or the number of agents that you have, it doesn't seem to be a predictor. So we looked at doing predictions maybe as based on gross profit. But that didn't seem to be predictive either, because people have flat rates, they have splits, they have caps, they have 100% plans. That doesn't seem to be a predictor either. But finally, we found a predictor that will work regardless of what commission plan you have, no matter what your split is with your agents. Here's what we found that works. If you take your labor cost as a percentage of total income, total revenue, labor cost as a percentage of your total revenue, the companies that we found that had 10%, 9%, 7%, 8% operating profit, they all had their labor cost around 4%. So it's as if to say, if you want to take 7, 8, 9% EBITDA margin to your operating net, regardless of what your commission splits are, if you keep your labor cost around 4% of total revenue, you're going to be able to get that kind of profit to the operating profit. Now, if your labor cost goes up to around 7%, then it seems very unlikely that you can get more than 3 or 4% operating net profit or EBITDA margin. And if you're up around 7.5%, you are going to be struggling to get even 1 or 2% of net operating profit of EBITDA margin. And we took this analysis and we tried to see if this is correlated in any way to agent count. And the agents counts can be high or they can be low, and it doesn't seem to be impactful. The EBITDA margin that you can make seems to be driven by labor cost as a percentage of total income, regardless of agent count. We even did it by the number of sides that you do. And you would have thought companies that do more sides would have a lower labor cost because they're dividing the work and becoming more efficient by doing more sides, but it doesn't seem to matter. There's companies with really high agent counts, numbers of sides closed in the first 6 months and lower costs. The only predictor seems to be labor cost as a percentage of total revenue. Seems to be the only one that works. Now, on the downside, here's a couple of takeaways for you. If your labor cost is between 7 and 8% of income, you should predict that you're going to have a net negative operating profit of 1 or 2% per income. And if your labor cost is 9 to 11% of your total revenue, then you should expect to lose between 3 and 8%. So for every, how does that work? For every $100,000 in revenue that you make, you could lose as much as $7,000 or $8,000 of loss for every $100,000 of revenue. Now, if your labor cost is north of 9 or 10%, well, then you're in really bad shape, because if you're running labor cost up here around 12% or 18%, then you should expect to have a net operating profit loss of 9 to 10%. But we did this a bunch, like 100 different companies, and it's very, very, very consistent. So I would take that as a takeaway. If you want to be profitable at all, then keep your labor cost under 6% of total revenue. And if you want to make meaningful revenue, somewhere 7, 8, 9% operating profit, keep your labor cost around 4% of income, and you should be all set. So anyway, that's what our next study is going to be about. We got it about—
Mark,
yeah.
There's two questions that came up. One is for Jim. He can probably answer really quick. Jim, Stephanie asked, with the staff you moved home, did any of those turn into independent contractors?
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, because of our size, we're a target for independent contractor versus employee. And so we really adhere to the IRS guidelines for independent contractors versus employees. If we're furnishing them computers, computer screens, or monitors, we dictate their time that they have to work, things like that. Read your independent contractor stuff that you do for your agents. It applies for making them an employer or not. All of our folks are employees, and it's just the way it is. I do have something, Mark, that I hope that answered the question.
Yeah,
but I have something, Mark, that your employee study, that this is my experience buying companies.
Mm-hmm.
Two things. One, a lot of owners do not take a salary. So a lot of owners' income is just out of the bottom line, and that would not show up in the study. A lot of spouses or significant others or whatever of owners do not get paid.
Yeah,
that's what I've learned through mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, it's a really big challenge. A really big challenge.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah, for our studies, we always try to only incorporate, an owner might not take his commissions, for instance, but the commission expense should be on the books as if he was, so that you have clean books. So when we choose a company to be part of our study, we try to control for that, to only use companies that have the managers on payroll and the owners put in their commission expense on the books. What else, Deanne, did you have questions?
From Michael. So he asked, so the assumption is that a novice agent at a lower level, split 50-50, and a seasoned agent at a higher split will continue to perform in the new landscape at the same level. Is there a way to scale the amount of performance by agent experience?
I don't mean to cop out on this, but I'm not sure I understand the question. Anybody else? And I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
I can chime in because I think I understand Michael's question is that your experienced agents are probably, it's been the discussion in this new environment is that your inexperienced agents, typically the ones that are newer that you have a better split with, aren't going to be able to sell their value proposition as well as experienced agents that you typically have on a higher split. And so I think that's what Michael is getting at here.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to it yet, because I like to be guided by the numbers. But I'll tell you two things that we're examining that we think is crazy important. And it's one of our next studies we're going to do. We have found, for instance, that high producing agents always demand the highest splits from the brokers. They don't leave enough meat on the bone for the brokers. But the other people that are really hitting the brokers for a lot of commission splits are the folks that are leaders of the teams. So the team leaders are negotiating really good splits for themselves from what we see. Which you would think is a bad thing from the brokers because they don't get to put those people on 50-50 splits. They're on very high splits, the teams are. But the thing that's really confuddling is in our studies, agents that are members of a team are much higher producing than independent agents that are not on teams. And so while the profit split that you get to keep on high producers or team members is lower, at least from what we can see in the studies that we're doing, the agents that are team members list more deals, close more deals, pen more deals, and the percentage of not, one of the things that we do in the spotlights, any of you guys that have AccountTECH, you can see the spotlight on this for your own company. It's under the ranking. If you go to the ranking spotlights in AccountTECH, you'll see that the number of unproductive agents on teams is very low. Whereas for the first part of 2024, a lot of companies, most companies have a lot of agents that have been very low producing or non-producing altogether. But if you filter that out only for agents that are on teams, agents that are on teams are almost 100% productive by this point in time in the year. So I don't know if Michael, if that helps you, but it is definitely something that we're all going to be facing, especially if, and this is the thing we don't know yet, if you look at the revenue split between how much money do we make off the list side, how much do we make off the sell side, for years and years, it's been remarkably close to 50-50 in most brokerages. It's going to be really interesting on a go-ahead basis to see if, on a go-ahead basis, is our overall revenue going to shift strongly to the list side and away from the sell side, so that are we headed into an environment where the only valuable agent is a listing agent? I don't know if that's true, but I think that we're all going to learn a lot in the next year. Anyway, around that. I'm sorry, Mike, if that's not a clear answer, but I think that's the best I can do with the question.
So I was just looking at in the initial explanation, the assumption was that we figured out the average per agent by lumping them all together. And typically the newer agents don't provide as much income to the company.
It's absolutely true. It's one of the things, Michael, that a lot of people are looking at right now. Like one of the things that we encourage people to look at is overhead per agent. And it's very straightforward. AccountTECH does it for you automatically. Look at the total expense in some office. Great. Take that total expense for everything, rent, utilities, and managers, take all the expense and divide it by your agent count, and you know what your overhead per agent is. And so there it is. If you know your overhead per agent, and again, it's on the spotlight called profit per agent, then as long as every agent earns that amount of money, that office is going to be profitable. Great. But the thing is that's happening for about the last 9 months is a lot of non-producing agents are, what's the word I'm looking for? They're unhiring themselves, which is great. So you have much less unproductive agents on your roster. But the flip side of it, if your agent count is going down because of non-productive agents leaving, you just got to reevaluate your overhead per agent. Because if you're dividing your total overhead, if that doesn't change, but your agent count goes down, the break-even dollars per agent has got to adjust appropriately. So these are the big questions. Dee, any more questions before we wrap this up?
Stephanie also asked, besides title, mortgage, and escrow, are there other ways for additional revenue streams?
I think I saw, Mr. Fight, on your presentation that you guys have an insurance company.
We have title insurance, an MSA on mortgage, and a property management company. And I just put in the chat about property management. And also 25 years ago, we started a vendor network. And that is probably our it is our highest margin, profit margin business of all of our companies.
How does that make money for you? I don't understand that. I'm sorry.
You know, so we have over 200 vendors that pay us monthly, and they have the honor of being a preferred vendor. You go out to century21judgefight.com, click on, I think, services, and then preferred vendor network. You can see them out there. They have the honor of going to our meetings and bringing lunches in. We make gross revenue right under $500,000. Our net profit on that business is about $300,000. And that doesn't include all the lunches and breakfasts and meetings that they have the honor of feeding our people. And we estimate another $250,000 a year they spend that we don't spend on feeding our folks donuts.
Wow.
It's a highly profitable business. But it takes time to get started. We have a full-time salesman that's all he does is sell companies and keep them and retain them. And then we have a part-time assistant in that department as well. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Does indeed. Does indeed. Well, Mr. Fight, I know this was unexpected to have you presenting today, but thank you so much. Your insights are always so valuable. And for those on the call who, if you think, you know, that maybe the Century 21 Judge Fight is really strict and really rigid with how they manage their expenses, well, I'm just telling you, they're crazy successful, as you can see from the presentation that Jim did. So really strict and disciplined seems like it's the only way to go, because boy, you can't argue with that kind of success. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Fight, for jumping in unexpectedly like this and helping us out today.
Well, the only thing you left out, Mark, is it's all about people. We all know that. We're in the people business, number one. And getting the right people in the right seats on the bus, as Jim Collins would say, critical. And by the way, we work at that all day, every day. That's our biggest opportunity and our biggest challenge. So always remember the people are what it's all about.
Well, guys, thanks everybody for coming to the webinar today. Our next webinar, you'll get an invite to it. It's going to be digging in deeper to these labor cost numbers. And so we hope to see you on the next webinar. Thank you, everybody, for coming today.